Hey, welcome to Muse News Crypto. I am Nate Muse. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're watching. I'm going to kind of jump in and do a market overview, touch on a couple of hot topics. We've got a few different things we want to talk about regarding Gary Gensler, maybe what's to come with Gary, some information that maybe he's holding back. On top of that, we've got the whole PEPE news, PEPE coin. You guys have probably seen the Pepe the Frog meme coin that's been launched over the last few weeks and has been taking off significantly, as well as some topics on Algorand and just kind of Bitcoin market as a whole. So jumping in though, market on the 7-day, as you can see here, is pretty much in the red. So we'll see how that continues to unravel over the next couple of weeks, a couple of days. No one really knows what's going to happen, but we are currently in the red on the 7-day, but I wouldn't take too much from that. If you're a Bitcoin maxi, you know that Bitcoin's definitely up from a couple years back, and obviously not quite where it was at from the peak of the bull run, but we are holding support at about that 28.2 mark. Currently, we're at 27.2, which is going to be crucial. We do have right here this kind of line of support that we've seen, this yellow line for, this is just the 4-hour, but really important for us to close the day on this candle as a green candle. Really will be telling on whether or not it ends the day on that, or if it's going to end up being a red candle and we're kind of going down to the downside. Many do believe that Bitcoin's going to end up tracing down to like 22, and then we'll see a pretty strong correction following that back to the upside. Me personally, I think that we're going to hold probably some pretty strong support at this 27.4 line. And over the next couple of days, that'll be pretty telling on what's to come. So we'll stay updated on that. But yes, we will come back to the daily. This is just the daily chart right here that we'll talk about here in a few, and kind of some bullish information that may come out of some replication of this 2018-2019 bear run, followed by our massive bull run. We'll talk about that at the end of the video. But jumping into some topics here, we've got some information, some news around Europe. So the European Parliament, essentially lawmakers, it's saying here on Thursday, gave their final blessing to an ambitious law that would give the European Union, its first rules to govern the crypto industry. So many are calling for crypto regulation worldwide. Many are totally against it. Me, I'm kind of indifferent, right? As long as the regulation itself is not, taken away from being able to keep everything on the blockchain and be able to, essentially keep yourself anonymous while attacking cybercrime and all that. I mean, I'm for that, right? But I do want the government to kind of stay out of crypto as a whole. Obviously, they want their hands in it as much as they can here in the US, and we'll talk about how this decision was made kind of based off of how the US has been treating major crypto players in the industry. So it says here that the approval of the EU's markets in crypto assets, or MiCA, they call it, regulation this is the first time that the government has tried to supervise any sort of upstart industry of this magnitude. And it's going on to say here that the commissioner, Mayreed McGuinness, said that on Wednesday that she expects the legislation to come to force in July. All right. So why I think that's bullish, take the regulation portion of it aside, but why I think that's bullish just for them to start to act on this legislation in July specifically is that's obviously a month after June. And in June, we're going to see Hong Kong kind of open up some regulations in China. China isn't necessarily going to open up trading, but they are working with Hong Kong, and Hong Kong is going to open up some stricter regulations and open up some trading that otherwise was not there in China as a whole. So I do believe that China is going to kind of use the Hong Kong rollout of their regulations to come as kind of a baseline on whether or not the entire country is going to follow. So for this to be following this EU news, kind of following what's to come in June with China, I do see that as a pretty bullish indicator that Bitcoin is probably going to be on the rise around that time. Anyways, it's talking about specific requirements that will take into effect progressively with the rules governing specifically stablecoins, for example, set to apply, that is expected to come out in July, as I mentioned. So anyways, here it's talking about how they've been in development for 3 years, that they've welcomed crypto executives as an alternative to the U.S. approach to policing policies, right? So again, U.S. has kind of fallen behind in terms of working with major players in the crypto industry, aka working on getting Binance US out of the US, working on the whole Kraken crackdown, and Kraken agreeing to settle for that $30 million lawsuit. On top of that, the Coinbase Wells notice that was issued by Gary Gensler, we'll talk about here in a few, about how that in itself is just kind of over the top and overreaching. Even the SEC agrees, and our own congressional members agree, and many other people in the U.S. government also agree. So me personally, I think Gary's going to be out the door pretty soon, and I think that will be good for the whole, Bitcoin community. So crypto community as a whole as well. Anyways, so kind of moving on here, we'll touch a little bit on that. As I mentioned, the Hong Kong information I talked about a second ago, just briefly covering that. Yes, so it's not China. Again, it's not China as a whole that's going to open up crypto trading. It's Hong Kong. Okay, so they're going to be working on, or have been working on, creating essentially this harbor for Web3 startups, for crypto companies to kind of work their business into people in that area at a very quick, very fast rate, right? So just making sure that the infrastructure is there for them, and that these businesses can feel welcomed to kind of move their businesses into Hong Kong. I know there's upwards of like 80, 85, maybe closer to 90 now Web3 startups that are going to be moving to Hong Kong in June. So that in itself is very bullish as well. But again, not China as a whole. Yes, China holds the most wallets in the entire US, but they don't necessarily, it's not necessarily saying China is going to be open up trading. It's just Hong Kong is going to kind of work to open up trading a little bit more, and regulations are going to be in place for the different exchanges that are in the area. So exciting stuff. Anyways, moving on here, Bittrex. We know about Bittrex. We know the whole situation with Gary Gensler. If you're not familiar, essentially Bittrex is under fire by the SEC. There's a new lawsuit where the SEC is alleging that the crypto exchange operated unregistered securities, right? So this is not something that's been deemed necessarily by the SEC, right? They can't necessarily say that they're operating with unregistered national securities, because they being the SEC is not determining what's a security and what's not, right? We'll show a video of Gary Gensler here in just a minute on how he's kind of wishy-washy on his opinion with that, and why our own representatives agree and think that Gary likely should get out of office. Okay, so Bittrex has denied these claims, as it says here, and accused the SEC, much like our own congressional members, of having an anti-crypto stance and trying to drive the crypto sector out of the United States, as it says here. I fully agree with that. I do 100% think that there are people in power that are going to benefit by crypto moving out of the US. And I think that Gary Gensler, along with a bunch of his cronies, are probably in the pocket of a lot of people, right? Not alleging that, just personal opinion here, right? I do personally feel that Gary Gensler is more of a puppet, if you will, and he's kind of the one that's, the face of all these different things that are happening, these crypto crackdowns. And at the end of the day, I think there are many people that are going to benefit depending on what he does, right? Now, on that note, I'm going to play a quick video. Shout out to my shorts part of my channel here. If you haven't checked out my shorts, definitely check them out. I do daily shorts. I'm going to go ahead and play just a couple clips here from a short that I posted the other day titled Crypto Vengeance. So here we go. And this is going to be a couple of the congressional members in the US kind of grilling Gary Gensler and questioning him on his outlook on what's a security and what's not. So here we go.
I'm asking you, sitting in your chair now, to make an assessment under the laws as exist. Is Ether a commodity or a security?
Without speaking to anyone.
I know you've repeatedly said you're not going to speak to one, except you've spoken to one, Bitcoin.
A Hotel California rule for crypto where you can check in anytime you like, but you can never leave. You have endless discovery with no resolution and no clarity for the captives in the market. You have unworkable proposals for overhauling equity market structure, a de facto ban on crypto through proposed custody rule. You have high staff turnover, unhappy people leaving your office, and unhappy companies and capital leaving our country. As I'm introducing legislation that removes the chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission and replaces the role with an executive director.
I'm asking you, sitting in your chair now.
Right. So that congressional member there a moment ago was talking about how he's going to introduce this legislation that's going to get Gary out of office, right, is the whole goal with it, and how he's essentially abusing power. And I personally agree with that. And I know a lot of people dislike Gary Gensler for this reason. Yeah, I mean, he's attacking all these different crypto exchanges with really no follow through. I mean, Kraken, they kind of just threw in the towel and paid a $30 million fine, but they shouldn't have to do that. I mean, the SEC is taking a stance that Gary is kind of, overreaching his power, right? It's not just these congressional members, it's the SEC themselves. There's members of the SEC that have spoken on this before, right? If you go back to a few of my videos previously, firing Gary Gensler, I think is the name of the video. If you go back and check that out from a couple months ago, that does go into that in great detail on how, he is kind of on the chopping block and has been for a little while. Gary doesn't look at it that way. It looks like he looks at it as if he's just doing all this good for the community and he's protecting us and all that. But what happens when all of the people that hold crypto in the US can no longer have an exit, right? AKA a way to sell off their crypto if crypto is banned in the US, or if Elizabeth Warren bans wallets, as she's tried to do. How are we going to sell what we have if we need to at any point, right? We're not going to be able to, right? We're going to have to transfer it to an international account or something like that to make sure that we're actually getting our money, right? So that's not helping the people in any way, shape, or form. But anyways, I think Gary Gensler is not going to be around for very much longer as far as being in office. Okay, so on the Gary Gensler note here, what is he hiding, right? That was the thumbnail. What secrets is Gary hiding? What is he holding back? Okay. So it says here in this article on Coincu, the SEC came under criticism for labeling Algo or Algorand an unregistered security, quote unquote, despite the SEC chair Gary Gensler shilling the crypto in a video, right? Yes, you heard that right. He has actually openly spoken positively about his buddy. We'll show the video here in just a second, the founder of Algorand, and now Algorand is under file in this lawsuit with Bittrex, right? So something is going on, right? You don't talk so highly of Algorand like you'll see here in a moment, and then just a couple years later, involve them in a lawsuit, right? If one person felt strongly about a project and felt that it was secure and there was nothing to worry about at one time, and then a couple years later, when you're the chairman of the SEC, you're going to come after that business. I mean, that just doesn't make sense, right? Your outlook changes once you're in a different role? That's crazy. But anyways, here it's talking about how the Algorand's foundation, Algo, is one of the 6 tokens that Gensler is alleging were unregistered securities in the Bittrex crypto exchange, right? So going on here is a video. Mason Verlis, Verslewis, is another crypto creator that had reposted these videos from a few years back. So I'm going to play these for you of Gary Gensler talking about Algorand. And as you know, as I just mentioned, Algorand is in this suit and attempting, and it is being attempted to be taken down by the SEC. So here's the first video.
So governance is tough. You could create Uber or Lyft on top of a blockchain technology today. Well, maybe in 5 years you could. It would have the performance. Silvio Micali's Algorand, who's a Turing Award winner at MIT.
That's who we were just talking about. Okay, keep that in mind.
That I work with. Silvio's got a great technology that has the performance. You could create Uber on top of it. The question is then who would update the software? So governance is tough.
And here's another video.
Bitcoin's now the currency that's hypothetically the Bitcoin or some crypto. Aline would tell us it would be some other crypto. Maybe it's Algorand or something. What happens? What's going to happen to this?
I mean, he's no idea what he's talking about. He's completely shooting from the hip. I mean, he's talking about Bitcoin and Algorand, and when he was on trial with the House here, and it just, none of it makes any sense, right? He can't answer questions for the congressional members. He's talking about, certain things regarding Algo and Bitcoin, and how, he feels kind of bullish about them and trusts in their project. And he's friends of the gentleman that we'll play a video on here in just a second. I mean, none of it has any base. I mean, there's no real allegations yes, there's allegations, but there's no real follow through with those allegations. And I don't see it being any differently with Algorand. I mean, Algorand is a solid project in my opinion. And I don't think that, he really has a whole lot to stand on. I think he's just using the name because a lot of people know Algorand and a lot of people know Bittrex, and, trying to create this additional FUD, this additional fear in the market to potentially bring the prices down and all that. I personally think there's a good chance that Gary owns Bitcoin, that he owns a bunch of different of the projects, crypto that he's been coming after, right? So if he can drive that price down, then maybe he can pick up a bag, right? Not necessarily saying that that's true, and I have no proof of that, but I mean, it would make sense, wouldn't it? So anyways, moving on here. Here is that gentleman that he was just talking about, right? So we've got the founder of Algorand that is talking about Gary Gensler, and Coindesk here, who is owned by Grayscale. We've talked about them in the past, but they do report some good news from time to time, is asking the founder of Algorand how he feels about Gary Gensler's rule and kind of what's been going on with that. So we'll go ahead and play this video here.
I was just going to say, I was watching this. There was this meme I saw, and it was the Suez, the ship stuck in the Suez, and that was the SEC, and there were a million little boats trying to get in, and those were the Bitcoin ETF proposals. I'm just curious, any thoughts on what you think Gary's going to do on that?
Well, Gary is going to do his utmost best not to get stuck like the container in the Suez Canal. And there is a lot of good that can be done, not only for the American consumer or also the national market, but the international market. I think that, blockchain technology with transparencies and by distributing trust across a very large base, being decentralized, there is a lot of benefits that every participant can get. And I think this is not going to be lost of SEC. Of course, they have huge responsibilities, but we will deal with that too. And, I am very optimistic.
Not so much now. That's Gary's buddy. That's Silvio Micali, founder of Algorand, talking about how he's optimistic on crypto. And here we are a couple years later. This was back in 2021, but a couple years later, now Algo's, named in this suit. So kind of wild. Gary definitely has no loyalty or anything regarding that. And things change in the blink of an eye when it comes to him being the commissioner and him trying to stack his numbers, as he was talking about just the other day on how proud he is on how many different projects and different, Wells notices and everything that's been sent out to different crypto execs and crypto giants in the industry. So a little crazy if you ask me, but anyways, we're going to go ahead and move on, talk a little bit about Bitcoin and kind of what's potentially expected over the next few months. So there is a analyst, his name's Vito Lund here, that was interviewed by the person who wrote this article here, talking about how, he thinks that Bitcoin could reach 45K in a month, right? They're expecting it to be kind of a replication of the bear market from 2018 to 2019. And he goes on to elaborate a little bit more on how in June 2019, Bitcoin's bear market rally topped 13,008, 556 days after that. And when it had peaked at 19.7 back in 2017, and if it follows the similar pattern, that it could reach a high of 45K around May of this year, right? So he's talking about a pattern that I'll show you here on the 4-hour. No, not the 4-hour, I apologize, on the daily, right? So if we get our brush out here, I'll show you kind of where he's referring to. So he's talking about how, like, right in this range right here, we saw that decline from about 16.8 down to about 8.2, and then we kind of consolidated here for a little while, dipped some more, and then took that upside all the way to this consolidation for about 6 months into the actual bull market, right, where we saw that all-time high, came all the way up here to about 62.5, down all the way to 31, all the way up to just shy of 70, and here we are today, right? So looking at this here, they do expect this market to kind of be very similar to what it was back in 2018, 2019. If you look here, patterns are very similar. We are kind of consolidating right here. And if you look off to the left, we had this consolidation followed by a breakout, right? Now we're kind of consolidating, and hopefully we see an expectation soon of that breakout. But that target he was talking about is right here. So that could take a little bit of time to get up to that 45K mark, but that is what those analysts are talking about. And there's a lot of people discussing that. So we'll see what's to happen. Me personally, I think that we'll see a pretty big correction down to like 15K, somewhere in this range here, followed by that upside up to 45K over the next several months. Again, factoring in that situation with China in June, followed by in July with the regulation in the European countries, right? So I do want to kind of point out one more thing regarding the European rollout. So if I could just scroll up here real quick and show you guys. So here's just a graph showing orange being the US and a couple other countries across the world, or these other colors, but orange being the US and this deep blue being Europe without the United Kingdom involved, right? So you can see in Q1 of 2022, they were a very small portion as far as the VC investments into crypto at the time, right? And as time continues on, you see this deep blue line getting deeper and deeper and deeper to eventually they are kind of the majority of the inbound VC investments. So very cool to see for Europe as a whole. But moving on here, PEPE, right? So a lot of talk about PEPE and what's been happening with PEPE, right? The meme coin PEPE. So there is some information on here that I wanted to discuss with you. We won't go into great detail, but yes, they are talking about how, it's a very unique situation. Yes, it's another meme coin, and they believe that there's some promising aspects to it just based on how it kind of was rolled out, right? So no pre-sale, zero taxes, a liquidity pool burnt, contract renounced, PEPE is a coin for the people forever. You go to their site, it literally says the coin is useless, right? So there's really no utility to it whatsoever, other than the fact that there's a lot of hype around it and a big community around it already. And that counts for something, in my opinion. I really do think it does. Look at Doge, look at Sheeb, look at, even Voltu Inu and any of the other Inus that have kind of popped off over the last couple of years. If there's a major community behind something and it's holding strong, well, then why not throw a couple of dollars at it? Me personally, I recommend not throwing your life savings into any project, but I threw in, I think, like $75 the other day. And if I lose that, I lose it. But at the end of the day, I'm giving it a shot, not being paid to say that, but I do think that you should be very careful on investing in any meme coin at all. So moving on here, though, I do want to show you something that's pretty notable. So down 49% from the all-time high just a couple of days ago, and up 263%. It says here, zoom in just a tad, from the all-time low. Oops. Oh, sorry. From the all-time low, which was just 4 days ago, up 263%. So if you're able to take profits, let me know in the comments. I know Uniswap has a locked liquidity pool of about 2.2 million, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. We've got Ethereum as kind of the exchange token if you are swapping on Uniswap. And essentially the way I understand it is that any money that you try to go cash out, Uniswap is essentially making up for that and overfunding the liquidity pool with PEPE, right? And then in exchange for that, they'll have the listing of the price of PEPE go down just a tad to hopefully bring in a lot more buys, in turn bringing in more Ethereum. And it's just this revolving door. But market cap on that right now is 85 million. On CoinGecko, they're marked at 322, number 322. And over the last day, we've had 80 million in trading volume. So that's what I've got for you guys on the week. I know this was a longer video. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comments if you did. You guys all have a wonderful day.